let's kick this off then. So Brandon Harris, man, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast today. I somehow I'm not sure how I stumbled across your page, the Granite Roots photography page, and I started following it. I don't know how long, maybe 6 months or a year ago or something like that. But it's cool because you're posting all these clips from your times, on deployment and stuff like that, and different stuff. I think that's really interesting. So I want to get into all that, but I want to talk about you came in, when you came in and all that. So let's go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us where you're from. Like, why'd you decide to join the Marine Corps?
Sure. Yeah. My name's Brandon Harris. I'm from Northeast originally. I'm currently out in Michigan area, right around Detroit, but I'm from the Northeast. I grew up in the backwoods, and I was kind of one of always those cowboys and Indians, play soldier type guys.
For sure.
My father he was a Marine and he was in the Army. I think he did a few years in both. But the Marine Corps kind of always stuck out with me as a kid growing up and seeing the pictures, dress blues, all that stuff. And one of my uncles, he was in the Navy. So kind of all around, my grandparents I come from I guess, military family, most people would call it. So I kind of grew up always seeing these pictures of, in their dress uniforms and stuff. So that was like early on growing up. Fast forward to high school. By this point, I'm kind of done with school, I guess. And it'll kind of all come full circle, I guess, but the only idea at college I had was probably going out to like Montana State University and taking up photography with a journalism minor, which again, full circle. I'm kind of doing a little bit of it, but not to that extent. But I really didn't think that was going to be the route either. I wasn't a straight A student. I wasn't even a straight B student. It was kind of just, C's are cool, a D, it's still passing. So that kind of left the military. It was actually pretty late on in my senior year when I made the decision, like, I'm done with school. And I decided to sign up. So I'd actually talked to an Army recruiter first. Nothing against them. And then I started thinking about it. I was like, well, I guess if I'm going to do it, I'm going to go do it. So I switched over, met up with the Marine Corps recruiter, and had some conversations.
Isn't it crazy how, like, that's the mindset of a lot of people, that even people that don't really have any experience with the military, the narrative that the Marine Corps has put out, and their great advertising and marketing techniques, is that, hey, that's the hardest one. If you're going to do it for real, kind of deal.
Yeah. And that commercial, I mean, the whole climbing the mountain, slaying the dragon thing, I was pretty young when that commercial was coming out and seeing that stuff. So that was kind of a big deal, being a little kid and seeing that kind of thing. And then, my father, also a Marine, I was like, okay, oh, wow, holy shit. So I don't know how much that weighed on my eventual decision, fast forwarding 10, 12 years from when I first saw the commercial. But, I just, like I said, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it.
It just felt right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you regret, so you joined right after school, right? Right after high school?
Yeah, it couldn't have been more. I think it was like 2 weeks. I think graduated high school June 8th of 2008 or June 7th of 2008, and I shipped off June 29th. I was standing on the yellow steps.
That's so crazy, dude. That's so. My experience was that's what I wanted when I joined. That's what I wanted to do, and that's not what happened. I got in trouble my senior year of high school. I got arrested and stuff because I just turned 18 and everything, so I got delayed.
Okay.
And in the time, I was pissed about it. I was like, fuck, man, like, the war's going to be over. This is like right after September 11th. This is like literally, I was a senior on September 11th happened.
Okay.
And, but in retrospect, I'm like, man, I'm kind of glad I had a couple years to just kind of live life, not living with my parents, working, like really actually living, paying my own bills and doing my own thing, and then coming in. You know what I'm saying? Like that life experience was really great because as well as I do, your introduction to the fleet, it's not like you move from your parents' house and now you're in like a frat house and you're partying. Like your first, like explain your first months, coming into the fleet.
Shit. Okay. So coming into the fleet, I got to the fleet like December of 2008. We were on I was one of the first like accelerated SOI program. So we really just pushed right through SOI from after.
Really?
I had a week off from boot camp. It was, I think, maybe 2 weeks, and then went to SOI and we pushed through. I think we had Thanksgiving off. That was about it. So from boot camp to the fleet was a pretty quick experience. We we just kind of went right to it, as far as I remember. And getting to the fleet, I believe it was like December 15th, 16th, somewhere in there. It was just second week in December. My senior guys had just gotten back from their deployment to Garmsur, Afghanistan, not that long before. So they were still coming off that. They were welcoming back to America. They were coming back, partying a lot. And we just we felt right back when we got to the fleet. We walked in. It turned out just kind of be like an everyday type of weekend thing. But we were like, holy shit, is this it? Like, they were inviting us in, having drinks. I'll never forget. We got dropped off on Friday night. We're walking around. We didn't really know what to do. We just saw people walking around with drinks left and right. All the doors were open. Music was coming out. It was a party, and nobody was like getting on us. Nobody was yelling. Nobody was making our life hell. So we're all kind of like, what? I don't really know what's going on here. It's not really what I've heard. We're not getting thrashed like right out the door. Even fast forward a few hours to when we got off the bus from SOI, it was really chill. So we were all kind of taken back. And the next thing we know, guys are, hey, come on in, have a drink. Come on in, have a drink. All right, cool. So we're hanging out with all these senior guys that we thought were going to be beating the shit out of us and doing all the stuff that we've heard of and, welcome us to the fleet. And it really wasn't until Monday. And that's kind of where the shock came. It's like, it was all fun and games, and they were probably just having their fun too. But the reality of the fleet came Monday morning, real early, probably about 4:00, whenever the PT started. So
yeah,
it was a complete 180. I would not have thought that I was having drinks with those people, but it was all in good intent, obviously. But
I mean, most people don't even get that. Most people don't show up and have a couple, days of good times with them. I mean,
it really
from my experience.
No, and that's kind of what we were waiting for, because I think we got there like a Friday morning, and that's when we started doing our in processing, going to the COC or company outpost there, and then going down to SIF, getting our gear issued, and we had senior guys driving us around and doing all that. Mm-hmm. So that was, and it was pretty quiet. There wasn't a lot of. It was different from the SOI and boot camp experience, and not
for sure.
It was just such a drastic downshift, but also kind of slightly like, okay, not what I heard of or expected. So when's it going to come, if ever? And like I said, it did come Monday morning. But
so you came in, you mentioned going through an accelerated SOI, the School of Infantry program.
Sure.
I assume that's because that was right when when Obama was signing off on doing the surge. So I assume that they were prepping the battalions to pick up rotations. Would that be correct?
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, that's pretty much the timeline works out. So as I mentioned, I hit the fleet in December of 2008, and the entire workup going through, we were actually we didn't find out until it was sometime around August of 2009. We didn't really find out where we were going. Mm-hmm. And the initial area was going to be somewhere in Iraq. We were supposed to have an Iraq deployment in August of 2009, or September of 2009. I think we were supposed to go to a place in Iraq. So we're getting close to that point. We're doing our final field ops. Everything's feeling good. And then all of a sudden, everything changed. In 2009, the back end, which is when we went into the whole Marjah deal, that was, as far as I know, Obama's big push. So probably from the year prior, 2008, roughly when I was hitting the fleet or getting to SOI, is when they were starting to make these preparations for late 09 mm-hmm. to push all these people in. Because I think we were earlier on in the surge, but not quite towards the middle. Okay. If that makes sense.
No, yeah. That makes, because I was in Iraq in 09 and we were wrapping things up.
Exactly.
We were like literally getting containers prepped to load shit in. And then, the earlier GWAT guys will kind of remember this, but you could cross deck, when you were in Iraq, if you were deployed, if you were there, at the end of the deployment, they would give you the option to stay on with the incoming battalion that's replacing your battalion.
And we'd always heard of that.
Yeah, and I
never actually saw it.
Yeah, you would get 2 weeks off. They would get, at some point, not immediately, but at some point you could take a 2-week liberty period. And you fly anywhere in the world, they'd fly you anywhere. And the guys that did that on my deployment that were like, hey, we're going to stay for the next one, they were single dudes or they're getting ready to, it aligned up with their EAS. So they're like, I'm going to
Sure.
maximize the cash before I get out. They were in Iraq for like maybe a month more or maybe two. And then they all got shipped over to Afghanistan. So they ended up doing
wow.
Iraq and Afghanistan on one deployment. So yeah, that was kind of like
a ride.
I know, right? So yeah, that was a time period when everything was wrapping up there, and then the focus was shifting. You mentioned your unit had come back from Garmshire, which was a pretty major offensive.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Like that was the same. I'm thinking of the same thing, right?
Yeah, they were down there in '08, and they were part of a MEU that was just floating around doing a normal MEU tour, and they actually got called. And from as far as I know, and if any of the guys listen to this, by all means, reach out and tell me I'm wrong. But as far as I know, they were out to float for not too long, probably a month or so, and then they were told they were getting shifted over towards Afghanistan for just a few weeks, and then so they brought their big packs, and that was about it. Well, it ended up turning into a full-scale deployment for them for many numerous reasons. I'm assuming just because of the tempo and how big of a deal it ended up turning out to be to try to get these to uproot the Taliban and all the other fighters.
Yeah, there's a pretty wicked deployment video from the Cobra or the Skid Squadron that was supporting those operations in 2008 in Garmshire. It's got like a Metallica background to it.
Okay,
have you seen it?
yeah, I probably seen it. And that was one thing that I think that they definitely appreciated. From my understanding, is that they had a pretty good amount of support up in the air and on the ground, as far as because they had the whole MEU package, basically the entire MEU package got shifted over, and as far as I remember, they had a pretty good amount of support. So
man, that would have made the MEU worth
recall
it,
that
right?
video. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you don't hear about that too often, where the MEUs actually get shifted.
Yeah, I mean, for a little while they were sending them into Iraq because, again, people may not realize this, but what happens with the MEU, the Marine Expeditionary Unit, it's all the Marines that are on ship for deployment, or 3 ships really. And let's say, hey, we're in Iraq and we have a status of forces agreement that says we can only have 70,000 troops in country. Well, when the MEU comes in and drops their troops off, those don't count towards that because they're not technically on that deployment. They're on a MEU deployment. And that goes, as long as they're there less than 90 days, I think, it doesn't change the numbers. So it's like a weird thing like, oh, we only have 70,000 troops there. But really, there's a whole nother battalion reinforced that's out there as well. So that's I think something that people don't realize. But anyways, that's awesome though that the guys that you had in your battalion, that means that they have real world experience in Afghanistan on the ground. So that had to have been invaluable for you, correct?
For sure, and it was definitely comforting. Once you got past the initial shock of them trying to make your life hell while teaching you, which you're obviously used to at that point. But once you get past that, you start to really realize a few things, and that's who to look towards, not who to look away from, but just kind of who to watch out for. You just kind of get a certain sense or an aura from certain guys that, okay, I'm gonna follow that guy. If we're over there, he tells me something, I'm going behind him, not behind him, but I'm following him wherever he's going. So that was definitely comforting. But some of my senior guys, we had a pretty hefty group of senior guys. Even it was only for a little bit, probably a month or two, but we even had some Fallujah or Ramadi guys when I first checked into the fleet. So I got to meet a few of them, as well as the Garmshire guys. So I got to see the 2 generations of 1/6 there that had done Fallujah, Ramadi, and then Garmshire. So getting a little bit of the different experience was pretty interesting. Even though I will admit that the Ramadi and Fallujah guys, because they were so close to getting out, I didn't really talk to them too much. They really didn't have time for me at the PFC level there.
Yeah.
So, but what I did talk to them, or at least even just watching them and the way they conducted themselves, that was something to kind of keep in the back of your head, knowing like, okay, we'll make through it. We'll be good.
So, for you as a junior Marine in the infantry, what did you consider, like when you're looking at your fire team leader, your squad leader,
sure,
what did you consider as like this? What traits made you think this dude's a good leader? He knows what he's doing. And what traits were you like, dude, fuck this guy? Like where I'm just.
Yeah. So my squad leader when I checked in the fleet, guy Mike Cancel, I still see him kind of floating around on social media, so hope he's doing well. But he was one of those more lead with a firmer hand type. He's going to be in your face, and you're going to know it. You're going to know just about how he's feeling at any point, which I wasn't mad at. I mean, I understood at a certain level that you kind of had to be hard. You had to ride people hard because of the severity of the situation coming up.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, there was always that little bit of, okay, now you're just kind of being a dick, like you're just flexing because you can, or you're just whatever. You got a little bit of power, which we all kind of go through it as we progress through our leadership. I know I definitely got the little trip for a little bit, but cool back down. So I kind of understood that they were just fresh off, as we discussed, a pretty heavy deployment. So they had that swagger, they had that confidence level, and now they had the new guys to be able to be like, okay, it's my turn now. So I understood
Yeah.
that aspect. And then looking at my team leader, Eddie Quezada, again, I've actually been talking to him a little bit recently. Um, he, same thing. You definitely knew when he was upset, but he also kind of had that softer fist to the point where you could approach him, have a conversation. Not so much the disappointed dad, but enough to be like, oh man, I fucked that up. Like, okay, I got to make that one up. But also still not fearing him, but understanding that he can make my life hell at any second. So that
Mm-hmm.
was cool seeing the different sides of it. And then that was pretty much the general sense of a junior guy looking up to a senior guy as being like, okay, they are human. They can relate at some levels, but they will still make your life hell. But they know what they're doing and they know what they're talking about because they're standing here and they've been there, they've done it. So
So
you had to
that's
have,
the question
yep,
there then lies in, like, the new age Marines where they don't have senior guys that have been there and done it. You know what I'm saying?
sure.
Like, do you think that becomes do you think that that's going to force like new like corporals and sergeants of today's Marine Corps to like flex their leadership style because yeah, you've done some exercises and stuff, but you know what I'm saying? Like,
Oh, absolutely. And I do, I think that it will, I think it's a struggling point, and from what I'm seeing just across social media and following my old unit and just hearing the word through the streets is like there is a lot of issues right now in leadership positions, and that's from the the bottom up, from
yeah.
team leaders all the way up through company and battalion level. I mean, all the way to the top, really. But and I think that's kind of a part of that struggle is when I reenlisted in 2012, I think there was only, man, maybe six of us out of the entire battalion that reenlisted from that. So, I mean, you just lost a bunch of guys that had two, three deployments, and then it just continued to trickle from there. I mean,
Mhm.
battalions were losing everybody at some point, and having almost no reenlistments. Just, and you were,
Was
I
that
think you
because of
are
the
seeing that.
tempo? Was that at the
Um,
time though? Because you were in during a different time. At that time, tempo was high.
Yeah, and I think it had to do with, yeah, and I think it had to do with the high tempo that we did go through, but I also think it was B because a lot of people saw kind of a change coming, and not
Mm-hmm.
there's there's always going to be the 1%. That anybody in the military will say that. Anybody in general should say that because there's always going to be that 1%. But I started seeing a lot more changes, but depending on where this conversation goes, we probably get back to like reenlistment and the other deployments. But going back to your leadership question, is I am seeing the trickle down effect, and I started to see it in 2012 and on when I was at Quantico, because we were getting ready to leave, and then there was just no leadership. Let me backtrack that. Okay, so there's a lot of book smarts out there, not a lot of street smarts. And I think that's where we're getting to. I think a
Mm-hmm.
lot of it's becoming book heavy and not a lot of experience heavy. And I can only hope that the experience that is still being passed down, I still got guys I served with that are in, so I still know that there are guys out there. And there was definitely deployments after me. I mean, you had guys putting in some heavy work up until
Mm-hmm.
somewhat recently. And obviously, there's still guys all over the world, but I think that we did lose a majority of our combat experienced leadership positions, and I think that it is going to show whenever the next big conflict comes. I'm not saying that there's not people there that's not ready to step up, but you're not going to really know until you're there.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, no, you're right, exactly, and I mean it's a catch-22, right? Because what's the only way to keep that combat experience by keeping a war going? You know,
which nobody wants.
you can't keep a war going just to keep combat experience, right? But
Absolutely.
so it's definitely an interesting thing. You know, it's like I always wonder like what it is, what's going on there nowadays. I follow some of the social media. I put some weight into some of this stuff, but some of it's just people bitching. You
Sure.
know, because we all know there's assholes in our units that just like to bitch, and
Oh
if now
yeah.
they have a platform, oh, I can send it to an account that has 30,000 followers, and they'll post it. Like,
Sure.
you know, even if it is bullshit. But yeah, so did you? I'd like. Well, I want to ask this question, and then we'll move on to like your getting into your first deployment and stuff like that. But
Okay.
how did your seniors who had been there and done that, had gone to Afghanistan and stuff like that, how did they convey the seriousness of what you were getting ready to go do? Because you don't know, you know what I'm saying? You've never done it. So, but they have to try to make you understand like, hey man, we're doing this. So fucking old boy's leg gets blown off. You put the tourniquet on properly under stress, you know, like how did they convey that seriousness?
Yeah, and I think they did a good job. And like I remember doing our CASEVAC drills and really any of our drills. And when you messed up, they would really let you know it. And like if you went into the door at the wrong time, if you flagged somebody, if you didn't get the TQ or the tourniquet on quick enough, they let you know. And it was a different. You could just kind of see it. You could tell when they're just having fun at the barracks or out in the field, messing with you, just having you sweep water or some shit. And then you can tell like you need to know this information. I think you can see a look on a man's face or anybody's face when they say, "Hey, you need to know this information because it's life or death." And then some of the guys, you could see that like, "Hey, you need to know this because I've been there. I've had to do this in person." And it's just a look, I guess, and just a trust level at certain points in training. Like as you get to know them, you're like, okay, yeah. I mean, if you're saying it matters, it's because it matters. As far as as far as them preparing for everything, I know a few guys from that Garmser deployment that said, this was nothing like our deployment. This one was worse, a lot worse. So I think there was a certain level of unknowing and unexpectedness amongst all of us, just because of the severity and the size of that deployment scope, I
Yeah.
guess.
All
So I
right.
think there was a lot of unknown between all of us, but I, I knew who I was going to follow.
Yeah. No two deployments are the same, but yeah,
No,
for
nope.
sure. Um, so let's talk about that first deployment, man. So
Sure.
you guys got shifted from Iraq to Afghanistan,
Yep.
and now you're getting ready to head out the door. You know what was going through your mind, junior guy, first deployment, getting ready to get on the bus, saying goodbye to the family and stuff.
Um, it was definitely we've been training for really would say we started in January of '09. We've been doing our entire workup, kind of getting pumped up. We did all the live ranges. Been out to Cali, which we all hated and everything, but we did some pretty cool ranges. So I think when we were leaving, it was kind of that weird emotional roller coaster of like, okay, yeah, this might be it, but at the same time, like we're not shooting at silhouettes anymore. We're not shooting at rubber tires on range
Mm-hmm.
400. I'm a strap of rockets to my back, and the next thing I shoot at with it's probably going to be something real.
Yeah.
So like you had that kind of like in the back of your head, but at the same time you're looking at your family standing in front of you, like this might be it. So it's kind of a weird juggling of emotions, and I don't really think that feeling ever went away for any of the deployments. But the first time going in, it was like you almost just wanted to get on the bus. Like you didn't care about much. I kind of just wanted to get on the bus. I actually ended up keeping a journal every day that we were deployed from the moment I got on the bus to the moment we got off the bus coming back from the first deployment. So I ended up keeping it every day, and I read through it every now and then. And looking back at that first night, it's like, okay, this is kind of where my headspace was at, and it is. It's full of that excitement, and okay, well, this might be it, but this is what I'm here for. So let's
Do
go
you
ahead
ever
and
look?
do it.
Do you look back at any of your entries and just shake your head like you fucking boot? What are you
Oh
doing?
my God. Pretty much every entry I read is like, yeah, I mean, it could have been a lot worse. When I'm sitting there bitching in my journal, I'm like, oh, I mean, really was that bad?
Yeah.
But it's really, I look at it now, it's just kind of be like, okay, that's where my head was at. This is how I viewed the world back then. This is how my views have changed. And it is interesting when you start looking at certain things and just, you know,
Yeah.
life views.
Yeah, man, experience, it like gives you a
Sure.
different perspective on stuff. For sure. When you look back, you're like, "Ah, okay, I get why that was the way it was," or you just
Yeah.
don't understand something. I think keeping a journal on deployments is not a bad idea, especially for guys that may be going through something that's a rough time,
Sure.
because it gives you an outlet to just kind of, let some of the things that's in your head out, because I think
Oh,
that's an issue a lot of people have, right?
it was, and there's definitely like key days, and there's key parts in the books that I remember where I can turn right to the page and be like, "Yep, like okay, like this is. I'm glad I got this out. I'm glad I wrote this down.
Yeah.
this is still the right feeling, or this is still, I still view it the same, or this is just I needed to remember it this way in order to move. Just do whatever with it. But
Plus, as a family memento, when
oh
your
sure,
great grandkids flip through that, that's like a
oh yeah,
wild experience for them, right?
oh yeah, this thing's all tore up and ripped. It's all leather bound and wearing
That's
away
awesome,
on
dude.
me. So,
That's awesome.
um,
So when
but
you
yeah,
guys
it
got
was
to Afghanistan, let's talk about the actual,
sure.
you know, you guys. I assume you flew into Leatherneck and then moved from there wherever down to where you were going.
Yeah, so we took off out of Cherry Point, went up to Bangor. I think going in, we stopped in Germany and then to Kyrgyzstan. And we were in Kyrgyzstan for maybe probably like 3 days or so, doing the baggage transfer, doing that whole gig. And then we flew to Leatherneck. Leatherneck, we were probably there for about a week. I'd have to go through and check the dates, but we were probably there for a week getting acclimatized and kind of getting a feel for like what the real desert was like, and just we were doing more training,
Mm-hmm.
basically doing the last minute checks, getting last minute issues, um, and I know you were talking about going from Leatherneck to from there we would end up going to Dwyer, but I remember having a big old company speech sitting there at Leatherneck right before we were about to take off, and the company commander's out there giving this big speech just to go to Dwyer. So I sit back and chuckle on that. It's like, man, we weren't even getting started yet. We're already getting big time speeches.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it was a good speech, but it wasn't a great one. Um, so we get to Dwyer and we took. I'm trying to remember. I think we took. Actually, I just posted a video of it. We took the Sea Stallions, the CH-53s there. We flew down to Dwyer, and I think it was before they had the landing strip. And yeah, that was getting to Dwyer was pretty cool because it's like each instance you get closer and closer, you just kind of get a little more ready and a little less ready, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Like coming into Afghanistan, I remember they did this whole combat drop thing, and senior guys all knew about it. We had no idea about it, so like we're all sleeping. Next thing you know, we're floating in the air, and the bags are like next to our shoulders because the bird had come down. The plane did the whole evasive maneuver thing. So at that point, you're like, oh shit, like we're in Afghanistan now. And then you get in there and you're at Leatherneck for a while. You see everybody walking around, officers walking around with their pistols. Some guys walking around with nothing, and you're like, oh, okay, well, there's a TGI Friday, so I guess Pizza Hut's over at Bastion. I mean,
Let's go get a
I
coffee.
guess Afghanistan's not that bad. And then you get to Dwyer, and it's a little bit smaller, and you're kind of walking around, and now everybody's at least carrying a gun on them at all times, and it's like, okay, so I guess we're getting a little bit closer. And then at Dwyer is really the first time that we went outside of the wire, which, for Dwyer, anybody that's familiar with it, it really was just kind of a spot in the middle of the desert. Actually, my senior guys were the ones that were pretty much building that place up and standing it up originally during that Garmser deployment. I think they stood Dwyer up when it was just a couple Connex boxes and HESCO barrier. Um, so being there, it was a little bit smaller of an operation, so you kind of started to get a little bit more of the fob feel or the more distant outpost feel. But even still, I mean, they still had their amenities, the big chow hall and stuff. So you weren't really at that point where you felt like you needed to have your head on a swivel. But we did go outside the wire every now and then. We went out to do some live fire ranges. I think I put a few pictures up of those. We went out, we did like an RPG range where we did some cross training with the Afghans on shooting the RPGs, and I think they fired off some laws just so we can get used to each other's weapon systems. We ended up doing some bounding and some maneuvering ranges with the Afghan forces because we were really kind of in charge of training that whole unit of Afghan army that we had, and that was part of the gig. Is they just kind of dropped us a battalion of really, really fresh Afghan soldiers and said, okay, well, over the next 2 weeks that you guys are around, you're going to be training them on all your stuff. So we spent a lot of time working with them, doing maneuvers, teaching them tactics, and really going over the gear with them. Like some of them had never held the M16, so she kind of showing them stuff. But going outside the wire with them to do ranges, that kind of gave you your first real world experience outside of a wire. Like we actually did set up security and had 360, and people were taking rotations on watch. So, now you kind of start getting a little more real feel for things. And it just became a little bit more, every day became a little bit more real. Each briefing at Dwyer, each time we did a little bit more like CASEVAC drill, it just became a little bit more of a real deal type thing. Closer, we kind of knew we were getting to pushing to the outskirts, I guess.
And when did you guys get word about that? Like, hey, here's our actual mission. Here's what we're going to be doing, and let's go. Let's get ready.
It would have been. I'm trying so hard not to just reach down and grab my book, but it probably would have been like January. I want to say around like the 10th, January 10th, plus or minus a few days, is I think when we ended up leaving Dwyer to push towards the outskirts of the city. But it was, a day or two before that we were pretty much living out of our bags constantly. And this was even a little bit before we had left. We're just kind of living out of our bags because we were just constantly moving. So they were only telling us stuff a day or two in advance. So when we finally got the call up, I guess everyone's like, all right, I mean, this is why we came to do it. Let's go get staged. Let's go get ready. I don't think many people slept, just not really understanding. But what we didn't realize is that we still had another couple stops to go. So we weren't really even towards that point yet, but we were kind of thinking that we were about to be. But we still had a few more stops after leaving Dwyer before we got into the city, really.
Yeah. Yeah. So I talked to some guys, actually some of my Marines when I was with 210, my FOs that were attached to 3-6 and Marjah. They were like, yeah, we were told, bring your assault pack or whatever. Bring your pack. You got to survive for like a week, and then we'll bring your gear behind you or something like that. And they're like, no one brought sleeping systems. They stayed really light because they had to carry all the ammo and everything else that they had to carry too. So most people had like ponchos and poncho liners and stuff. And then then they were like, the gear never came. So we were out there for a month in the city, fighting around and just freezing the whole time. Was your experience similar to that, or did you guys like come in with a little bit more stuff?
Based on that, I would say we were probably a little bit more prepared. I at least had a sleeping system, and I had a bug net too. I got a picture of, so when we left Dwyer, we pushed into just pretty much the middle of the desert. From Dwyer, we went to Fiddler's Green area. It was another staging point. So this would have been probably, I'd still say around just January, like 15th or so, because we were there for about a week when we ended up losing our first couple guys. We weren't even near the city yet. We were on the outskirts, but we weren't staging like day before stuff. We were still a few days out before we were going to move to our final staging point, which was like the day or two before the push. So we got to Fiddler's Green. We ended up losing our first two guys, Angus and Smith. And then, I think that's when it became real. I think that's when it became real for everybody. That was, it really went from just doing training to being a real life combat zone. That day wasn't supposed to be like that. It was just a little probing patrol. I wasn't there, but I heard it and I saw it from a distance. I think that was everybody's wake up call. I think we'd done maybe one or two just little patrols, a couple like a mile into the desert, just get used to patrolling. Once we got to Fiddler's Green, because we were stationed at 3 little outposts right outside Fiddler's Green, leading right up to the outskirts of the city. And yeah, when that day happened, I think that changed the whole game for everybody. That kind of set the tone for the rest of the deployment.
Was this a small arms attack or IED attack?
IED attack
Yeah.
with small arms. Small arms led into an IED ambush.
Mm.
Yeah, so that was a pretty tough day for everybody. That was we ended up doing a memorial service a couple days later for them. So we had only been outside the city for maybe 5, 6 days now. We lost 2 guys and we're attending a memorial service. So it kind of set the tone
Yeah.
for that deployment. And from then on, we all kind of just carry ourselves a little bit more head on swivel, a little bit more next step. Each step's different.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, but it kind of it set us up for a pretty good heavy hitting deployment. A lot of guys doing a lot of great things out there. So
Did you, after that first like event, where you lose these 2 guys,
sure.
did you have issues with other guys being like, dude, fuck this, what are we doing?
Um,
Or was
no,
everybody
and
more resolved, like, let's fucking do it now?
I think everybody was more resolved. Attending that service was definitely up to that point probably one of the hardest things that I'd ever done. It was actually like a couple days later, I'd gotten some snail mail that guy I'd grown up with, one of my best friends. He was actually KIA over in Wardak province. It was the 24th was Smith and Angus, and then 29th I ended up losing my buddy Mark. He was in the army though. He was a psyops guy. So like that whole thing was just building up this like level of anger. And obviously I was dealing with my buddy Mark on one page, but as a unit, we were kind of all dealing with this, being at this memorial service, everybody's kind of at an all-time low, but like, I mean, I don't think you could have a more pumped up group of guys ready to go take the city. I mean,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, ready to
we
strike
had,
back.
sure. Yep.
So let's
So it
talk
was kind of
about
just this general.
let's
Oh, go
talk
ahead,
about
man.
that movement to the city then. Let's move into your like final, hey,
Yeah.
this is our jumping off point for this operation into Marjah. What was
Okay.
the experience there? Was everyone like, was the intel good? I mean, like, give us the vibe and then tell us about that first day of the assault.
Yeah, so we were supposed to leave on February 12th, I believe was supposed to be the original day that we were going to push. And we had left that Fiddler's Green area, pushed to the outskirts where our platoon had just taken over this it was a mud hut that was just in this big wide open field, really nothing around it. So we had been there for a night and we were supposed to leave the next day on February 12th, but the weather was bad. So we ended up scrubbing that and pushing it to the 13th. So the night before, we had all of our vehicles, and I think it was like 120. We had like almost 120 vehicles in our convoy, from MRAPs and the tanks that were pushing, bulldozing the trail for us. I mean, everything on wheels that you would need to invade a city. We had it stretched out. So we were all in this giant staging area right along the river, and I remember all sitting there. It was a pretty quiet night, and we're sitting there, and they had pulled that night. They came over and they're like, "Hey, we don't have enough machine gunners. We don't have enough 31s to fill all the turrets. So we're going to start taking saw gunners." So I had been a saw gunner up to that point for about like the entire workup. So I ended up getting called up. I was put in a turret that night before the push. I got pulled out of my platoon. Like we had all been traveling and doing the workup and everything all the way up to the night before the push. And then that night they started putting saw gunners and turrets, and that really changed a lot of the platoon dynamics for the rest of the deployment. So I was in one. My buddy Three Pete, he was in the truck behind me. He was a saw gunner in our platoon too. So I'm looking up at my turret, and you're looking at all these brand new, like the nice big V-shaped turrets with the glass windows and the back, the black bass shield and all that. And they're like, okay, cool. So they go ahead and they're walking down the line. They're like, all right, Harris, this is yours. I look up. I had the only tow turret in the entire line of convoys that I can see that didn't have a tow in it. They wanted me, they had a 240 hooked up in this tow turret, which if you're not familiar, it's the really short walled ones with zero protection. So I kind of remember just sitting there looking up at it. I'm like, all right, cool. Like, fuck me, I guess.
Yeah.
So I look at my buddy Three Pete. I'm like, well, shit, I guess I drew the short straw, man. Like, good luck. So, and that it definitely did change, like going into the city a little bit. So next morning we wake up, day of the push, February 13th, and we start moving. And by moving, I mean we're talking snail pace. The route that they were pushing up front, they were running into so many IEDs. I mean, as you're driving, you just see wire sticking up out of the dirt all over the place. You could see HIMARS, or you could see the drones dropping missiles up in front of us. And then everything kind of came to a halt. It took us like 8 hours to go, I think, a quarter mile, almost a half mile. We really weren't making much
Jeez.
progress because we would stop, go, because they've seen us coming. Taliban, the fighters, seen us coming, and they were just putting IEDs. They were just laying IEDs as much as they could. Because our unit I was with Charlie Company, so we were in the mobile unit driving in. Bravo Company had gone into the city the night before via helicopter, dropped into the field. They got that the whole documentary, the Battle for Marjah documentary. That's Bravo. So if you're interested in learning about their side of the story, it's a pretty good one for them. So we're driving through, not making much progress. At that point, we actually had the Afghans were getting out of the MRAPs. They're getting out of these armadillos, and they're just walking down the river, doing their morning cleanup, doing all their prayers and stuff. And like, we were still moving. We weren't necessarily stopped. So like, we'd have to stop for them to get them, wrangle them all back up, get all dressed back up, and get back in the trucks because we were invading a city. So that was kind of frustrating, is keeping track of them. We'll try to keep your eyes out. And but where I was at in the convoy, I was probably like halfway back or so. So there was enough guys putting in work up front, kind of clearing it out. So I was able to take in the views for a little bit until we got further in.
Yeah, being in the turret's the way to be. You know, if you're in a vehicle, just because you can like
Oh,
experience what's around you, you can actually smell it and see it, and
for sure. I even though I had that damn turret, I wouldn't change it. I definitely wouldn't want to be down the truck. I was a little bummed though because, like I was saying, they had taken all the saw gunners and just basically put them on all these turrets. So, like my platoon, third platoon, they were once we got further enough across basically the bridge. There's a video out there of a giant Miklik going off, destroying the big bridge into Marjah, big cloud of smoke. It was that was really what kicked it all off. And then we built our own bridge and drove over that. So once we got over that crossing point, foot mobile started dismounting and really pushing out through the city and getting into the room clearing and going through the houses. And this is like the first day or two. It was pretty high tempo. So I had to stay up in the turret. So third platoon and all the other guys, all the other platoons, they took off and started going foot mobile. So I would stay on the road, and our unit, me, 3P, and the other guys that they took, we would continue pushing forward, and then basically all the platoons would just keep doing like bounding and overwatch, come back to the trucks for supplies, and then heading back out. And then at night they would come back, rest and refit, and then push back out. So it did kind of I love being up in the turret as far as getting to see that aspect of it, but at the
yeah,
same time I was really I'd done a whole workup with my boys there, and then the night before I got pulled from them, so
yeah, that
that's
sucks.
kind of a struggle.
I
So
guess I was thinking that you would be in the turret till you got to wherever they would pull all you guys out and go do your foot mobile thing. I didn't realize you stayed up there the whole time. That sucks. That is a
yeah,
bummer.
so I was up there for pushing forward about a week into the deployment. So we finally made our way into the center of the city. This is probably like day 2, 3. We finally made it to like the main market center of Marjah.
Mm-hmm.
And we were there for about a day. And then after that, that's when Bravo Company really ran into trouble up in, we call it like the raceway. So they started getting a pretty heavy contact. So they took our little mobile section. They took about, I would say, probably 12 of our vehicles, including myself and a couple others. And we ended up driving out to the raceway to give them some support. And I mean, we were taking sniper fire on the way out there. We probably took 5 or 6 pauses so they could go ahead and drop some missiles from the sky on some guys trying to put some IEDs in front of us. So by the time we got to racetrack, I mean, we could definitely see what was going on with Bravo Company. So we provided them with some foot mobiles. They went out, they did some work, and were able to kind of alleviate Bravo to allow them to get set up where they were. And then at that point, we ended up pulling back out. So now we're probably 4 or 5 days into the push. And at that point, we ended up pushing for another 2 days down towards the south west of Marjah, which is where we would eventually kind of set up. So the 12 trucks that we had, they kind of formed this own little platoon. We formed our own little foot mobile platoon because we ended up getting to where we would establish FOB Naria, and the company had taken so many hits on trucks that we were kind of short on trucks. So this little mobile section we had, they ended up taking our trucks away from us, and they just dropped us at this basically a mound of dirt, which we ended up building up into an actual patrol base. But they took all the trucks, and then we became kind of like a bastard platoon. We were just a mix of
Huh.
guys, a lot of weapons guys. We had a bunch. I had like probably 3 or 4 guys from third platoon, a few guys from second platoon, a few guys from first platoon, and pretty heavy on the weapons guys. We had a lot
Yeah.
of machine gunners and mortarmen that were rolled with us just because they'd come out of the trucks too. Um, so we just formed this whole brand new platoon, and it was awesome. It was kick ass. I mean, I really there was a lot of times where I wish I was with my original platoon and all my boys, and we saw them every now and then. But yeah, we had this kind of kick-ass, disgruntled platoon of degenerates that didn't really have a home anymore. So we just kind of
Yeah.
made it our own, and yeah, it was a kick-ass group of guys. It was awesome.
You know, it. I think that's a testament to the level of training, though, where any
Sure.
group of guys from different platoons, different elements that don't necessarily train together, can all come together seamlessly and work together, right? You know, that's
Oh,
like that's a Marine Corps thing for sure. I mean, David
yeah.
Armstrong was just talking a couple podcasts back. He was out in 29 Palms for EMV and was watching mixed gun crews on howitzers. And he was like, I didn't even realize that some of them were reservists and some of them were active duty guys until we asked later on. He's like, I thought they were gun crews that had been training together for, months or whatever. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. That just, again, that's a testament to the training and the ability of our own people.
Yeah, definitely. It was cool to see. And there really, as far as I can remember, there really weren't any growing pains. I mean, when we kind of became that bastard platoon, we started just we made our own squads, and it was basically like a draft lottery, and we'd mix them up every now and then. And I don't know if I can't see it being a wrong thing, but I mean, we were trading guns. So like, hey, you want to take the 203 today? Yeah, cool. You want to take the saw today? All right, cool. But like everybody knew how to operate them. Everybody was real proficient and fluid on all of them. So we kind of like it wasn't we
I've
weren't
actually
doing what
heard
we
multiple
wanted
people
to.
say they've done that because they're like, man, I'm tired
Yeah,
of
so it
fucking
was
carrying
cool.
this. So you want to try it? Yeah.
And it allowed other opportunities. Like like I said, I was a saw gunner for the entire workup and all the way through the first like week or two of the push, and then my buddy Dean Fano, he was like, man, I really just want to be a saw gunner. So I was like, take it, man. I really want to be a 203 gunner. So we ended up trading, and I ended up keeping his 203 for pretty much the entire deployment and taking point, which is one of the most profound and awesome experiences of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Is walking point and doing all that. So it was like I kind of because of this whole mismatched thing, I just got a bunch of really interesting viewpoints and different experiences from being the turret. All of it. It just really allowed for interesting deployment.
How was talk about walking point? What do you do to keep yourself from being complacent? Like you're the point man. You have to be on alert the entire time. How do you fight the urge to just kind of I'm just gonna keep walking and not pay attention for a minute?
Sure, and to be honest, I mean, there's times where you are, and there's times where I was definitely. I mean, there was the when I first started walking point, I'd already watched guys do it for like a couple weeks, couple patrols. I'd seen guys walking point, so I kind of got like the movement and how to do it, and kind of what to look for and routes to take and what routes not to take. So I thought that was pretty cool. And being from the Northeast, and I grew up in a very like backwoods, small town, middle of nowhere in the mountains. Like I love just walking through the woods and just getting lost type stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
walking point felt really natural for me as far as like finding the creative path, like where would they not think we were going. And because I used to be the tree climbing kid who would just go climb anything I could and look for the most difficult ways to basically get hurt and annoy my mother. So it was cool having that kind of liberate or that freedom to be like, I want to kind of go this way. I'm still staying within my bounds, but it was a very freeing experience. But going as far as the complacency, I saw myself starting to get complacent as I got more comfortable with kind of where I was at and knowing where the bad areas were. And we had different zones and different sections where, like, okay, if we go over here, we're definitely going to get shot. If we go over here, there's definitely going to be an IED. So as you enter those areas, you're a little bit more on edge. And I remember kind of keeping my head a little bit more on a swivel. And when I saw certain people, you know, as you get there and as you gain that experience of walking that area of operation, you kind of get to know the different areas where it sounds horrible, but where you can be complacent and where you can't be. And then you had the completely unknown areas where I would look back and be like, hey, you guys just stay back a few extra steps for the, you know, until we get to the next good point. But you guys stay a few steps back and just kind of follow my footsteps.
Isn't that
And
a crazy thought? Like, hey guys, stay back a little bit
yeah,
just in case I get blown up. You know, like
yeah. And I think
what
that
a
just
weird
kind of,
mindset to have in a job, right?
it was. And it was, yeah, going back to that whole freeing thing. It's like once you kind of came to and became comfortable with it all, it was just like, you know, if I go, I go. And I remember what drove me to take point was my team leader. He was really insistent on taking it, but he had a wife and a kid waiting for him at home. He just had a kid. So I was like, yeah, I mean, come on. I mean, just let me take point. Don't be stubborn. I'm just a PFC anyway. So,
That's crazy,
we,
dude. But that's awesome, I guess.
so it was cool. And I loved it so much. I kept on doing it. Even when our second and third deployment, I tried to walk point as much as I could. They really didn't let me on my third deployment. I kind of got taken out of that role. But my second one, I definitely did as much as I could. But it was cool picking the route. It was cool. Just everybody kind of relied on you. Not that I really wanted them to, because that's a big burden, and
Mm-hmm.
didn't really want that. But I knew that I could do it, and I
Were
did.
you
We
sweeping
were.
also? Were you the sweeper as well? So you're
Yeah,
sweeping for IEDs?
no, I probably used one of those 3 or 4 times, like ever,
Oh,
like
really?
on deployment at least. I mean, I used them in training. We used them all the time, but
Yeah.
what, you know, whether right or wrong, I really just kind of trusted myself and my footsteps, and kind of just very observant.
Yeah.
And
Bust it out when necessary kind of deal.
yeah, and there was definitely times, like the 3 or 4 times, you're like, yeah, I think I'm gonna go ahead and break it out this time. But every other time, I felt comfortable enough. And you know, that was probably just my arrogance and stupidity and me being young and dumb. It worked out for us. So in retrospect, I think I did all right. But um, yeah, I just kind of went with it,
Are
and they
there
followed me. So
Hey, they got to, right? What else are they going to do, wander off?
yeah,
Um are there any like engagements that stand out in your mind from the first deployment? I mean, cuz obviously there's the whole deployment was probably full of different things that occurred. Is there any moments that were
yeah.
like, wow, that was, you know, that was crazy, you know?
Um, yeah. I mean, we had so. At Fobneria, I mean, it was the Wild West. The first firefight that we really got into there was April 3rd, 2010. It was one of my buddy from back home's birthday, so I'll never forget it. Plus, it was a warm welcoming from the Taliban or whoever was shooting at us to the AO, because we had kind of been operating closely to our patrol base, and this was the first time we'd pushed out into the it was Tango 24 sector. And I remember walking through the village, and it was the first time that I'd really noticed that it was dead quiet. Like, this is one of those times where the streets were empty and there wasn't anybody out. And for the
Mhm.
few weeks that we've been pushing around, I hadn't seen that yet. So something right out of the gate kind of caught my eye. Like, yeah, it's a little bit quiet. And I put some pictures on Instagram of that patrol, and you can see in the pictures it's just us in the street. I mean, it's me and a couple guys in front of me, and it's just nothing but dead silence. And I think I got a few more snaps from that picture where from that patrol where it's like just people are creaking out the door. So you kind of had this weird feeling, and it got to the point where about halfway through the village, we had an elder come out. He's an older gentleman. He came out and he said, "You guys need to leave now." And we're like, "What?" And so he kept saying it, and this was through the interpreter. He wasn't speaking plain English or anything. He came up to the interpreter and, hey, you guys need to leave. You need to leave. And we're like, we're not leaving. So we continued our patrol. We really didn't have much further to go just based on the route that we had already planned. We weren't going to the edge of that village, but we were going to cut through and pop back out in a field. And that's what we ended up doing. And we got across the first field when we started taking fire, and it erupted out of nowhere. We started taking it from two different sides. I remember twice on that deployment, I jumped on the wrong side of the ditch. This was one of them. I jumped on the right, everybody else jumped on the left. So I had to sit there for a minute until they gained fire superiority, and I jumped back over. And this is when I actually still had my saw. I think I had it for this one because I remember being on my back in this ditch, and there was this little parapet, like little dog houses, we call them, on top of the mud hut. Some of them were 2-story where the stairwell came out to the roof. And it looked like we were taking fire out of there. I could see the dirt kind of kicking out of the windows up there. So I just, on my back, I was laying on my back in the ditch. I had my bipods on my knees, which is something I never trained for, but I just threw my bipods up on my knees. And I started rocking that thing, and then everybody else was shooting. We had a bunch of guys shooting behind us, and then there's a couple guys lobbing 203s up in that doghouse. And getting out of that one, it kind of got quiet enough where we had to make a decision on whether we were going to push in or push out. So we made the decision to start pulling back through the field, pushing away from the village, just because we as far as we could tell, they definitely had us on two sides, and we didn't know if they were working towards a third one. Mm-hmm. So we wanted to push out of there. And in all due fairness or credit to the Marine Corps, I never thought I'd dig a fighting hole, which I did on the outskirts of the city. We dug actual no shit fighting holes, and I never thought I'd actually do bounding and Overwatch, and we sure as shit did. The whole I'm up, they see me, I'm down. And I didn't think I was going to do that. And that firefight we had to in order to get out of there. And we eventually pulled back out. So that one was the first, that wasn't the first time, my first firefight. That would probably be, I think, my third by that point. But that was the first one where it was like, oh, the odds are not in our favor on this one, right out the gate at least. Mm-hmm. So that one was pretty eye-opening. We had a few other ones where, there was one at night, and we were shooting back and forth with these guys, and we were watching tracers go overhead. And I just remember somebody, I don't remember who it was, I just remember somebody behind me saying, it's pretty crazy that's like every fourth round. As you're watching these tracers zip by, and you're like, that is every fourth round. Like, where are the other three right now? Because it was pitch black. You couldn't see shit. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, okay. So that was kind of another eye-opening experience. Is like just wondering where those other three were out of all these bursts. And then as far as firefights go, we had a guy get hit, Kruger. It was a through and through. Went through, I think it was his right ass cheek or something, but they ended up taking contact. I wasn't on the patrol, but I took every QRF mission. I basically volunteered for everything. My family would hate me if they ever heard any of this, but I volunteered for everything I could. QRF, any mission, whatever. I just like going out and doing it. So we heard the initial burst go off, and it was they started the ambush with an IED, and they actually triggered it a little bit too soon. Fortunately for us, it didn't get any of our guys, but they did open up with a couple bursts of machine gun. I think it was RPK. 2 RPK nests opened up at the same time as the explosion, and one of the raking fires ended up catching Kruger in the ass cheek. So on this one, we had to get a QRF together real quick. At this time, we were kind of used to it. It was pretty hot around us as far as we were constantly QRF for other people or reacting to other stuff. Mm-hmm. So we pretty much always had our gear staged by the back door. So we got a QRF rolling. We're rolling out there, and it was probably, I don't know, half mile or so, maybe a mile. As soon as we got to the first big crossing to where we could kind of see them where they were pinned down at, we started getting, I don't think they were direct shots at us, but we were starting to catch the residual shots. So we started at that point, we had to kind of make our way up a little bit more careful. And I remember we had to make a pass through this big open field, and we thought that we started taking contact from the right. So I remember as I'm sitting there running, I had the 203 on this one. I'm sitting there running, and I mean, we were just lobbing 203s off to our right flank just because we really didn't know. We felt pretty comfortable that it was coming from over in that direction, because the team that we were running towards was straight ahead of us, and we knew that the enemies that had engaged them were directly behind them, so we couldn't engage them, but we were just kind of keeping our eyes off to make sure that nobody was going to come around. So we ended up pushing to the tree line adjacent to the injured Marine, and they popped the smoke in between us, our unit, and their unit. And this time, they're still taking and returning fire. And when that helo came in, I've never seen a more concentrated volume of fire in a single direction on the enemy's behalf, at least. As soon as that bird landed, it just felt like every gun in the place turned to them. And they were still shooting SMAs. I think they had a SMA with them. They were still lobbing SMAs and laws at the Taliban, and they were still trying to get shots off on this bird. They ended up making it out there good. Kruger got out fine. He ended up healing up all right. But coming back from that one, we were a little bit more stressed out. That was the first casualty that we had taken from our FOB. So that one kind of had us a little bit more on edge. And that was kind of like, okay, we can't all be lucky every day. And so that was, again, just deployment to me was just nothing but eye openers. It's just every day was something opening my eyes a little bit differently. And that day, we'd already obviously lost a few guys prior to that, but that was the first time that we had a guy get hit from ours. So everybody was a little bit more high strung after that. So that one was memorable.
Was that common, a sustained firefight like that? Because a lot of times when I was over there, it seemed most of the time they just want to take a couple pot shots at you and then bound off between the tree lines so you can't find them.
Yeah. That one was definitely longer, and I think it's because they knew that they had gotten one of our guys and that we were going to be bringing air, so they were definitely willing to stick it out and fight. Because I think that the intel that we had gotten after the fact from talking to locals was that was actually that was a small unit. That was a small Taliban unit that was traveling in a pack. I think it was like 8. I think they were traveling on 2 motorcycles or a few motorcycles. And they had been coming in and out of that tree line for about a week. And then we found all this out after the fact. They're like, yeah, they've been coming. They sit here every day for a week. And then at 4 o'clock, they clock out like a day shift and head back home. And then they come in at 8 and they just sit there and wait. So yeah, they were waiting for us. And they'd been waiting for us. So we kind of, yeah. So knowing that, and that they had the IED, they had at least 2 belt feds and then whatever other small arms they had. So they were ready for a longer one on that one. The only other longer one that I remember, which was another very memorable moment in that deployment, was we had a unit that was as far out on RAO as you could be, and pretty much was as isolated as you can be, on the very outskirts of where we knew it was pretty much their territory, being the Taliban or whoever. We knew it was theirs. And we really didn't go over there too much. And these guys were pushing that boundary. And they ended up getting pinned down. And this was another one of those things where it's just like, I'll never forget the radio calls of them basically being like, hey, we're running out of water. We're running out of ammo. Like, when is help coming? Our mobile section was too busy at the FOB Marjah in the center of the city, like getting mail or some shit. If you ever talked to any of the Nuria guys, there's some resentment with the mobile crew. And then everybody else, so like they were just so far out there that there was no realistic option. That was I think that was one of 2 mortar missions that we were actually approved of that entire deployment. For any of the guys I was with, we only shot 2 mortars that entire pump from FOB Nuria.
Wow, really?
And yeah, that's how tight the ROEs were. That tight. We had almost 0 air support. We had no real arty. We couldn't even drop mortar. Like I said, we had a 60 permanently set up, and we dropped 2 mortars. One of them went off, and then on our adjustment, the second round ended up landing in the mud and didn't go off. So after that, they ended up calling because these guys were so far out that we couldn't even lob them out there. I have a video of it that I'll probably post at some point, but you can see when the round goes off that we're just barely clearing the ESCO. I mean, we were trying to get that thing out as far as we could, and we couldn't get it out to them. So at that point, we ended up getting ready to do our QRF. And we started pushing out, and we had heard that one of the guys had shut down. He'd hit that black zone. He'd kind of been like, hey, this is it for me. And it was nothing against him. Totally understand. When you hit that point, you hit that point. So they were already down a guy. They were running low on ammo. They were running low on water. And they got lucky. I mean, I don't know what happening, whether they ended up killing all the guys. I don't think so. I think the Taliban ended up running out of ammo and then just left. But it was getting close for those guys. I just remember sitting there listening to the radio, like, okay, we need to get moving. And
That's crazy, man.
It worked out. So
that's crazy that you're saying that you guys had a hard time getting air support or fire support, because of the ROEs. Because I would have thought, during that time, around the invasion time, or the pushing of Marjah and then the cleanup afterwards, trying to gain those footholds, I would have thought that fires would have been in use quite a bit, especially like HIMARS and mortars and stuff. Well, especially mortars, because you can approve them at the battalion level. For those that may not realize, the way it works is the fire support assets have different levels of approval. So 81 millimeter mortars and below can be approved at the battalion level. So the battalion commander, the battalion operations officer, and the XO, the executive officer, can approve that. They could also, when I was there, they could also approve standard artillery rounds, like, Illum and even standard HE, which kind of blew my mind. But if you wanted to get precision guided munitions, like HIMARS or the what's it called? I can't believe I forgot it. The GPS. The GPS guided artillery round, Excal, the Excalibur rounds.
Excal, yep.
And air support, that all had to be approved by the regiment. Well, the air support didn't have to be. That could be approved at the battalion as well. But like PGMs, like the HIMARS and Excal, had to be approved by regiment for some reason, which was really weird until we got that switch to where the battalion could approve HIMARS. I think we fired the first one when I was there with 3-6, where the battalion approval. Wow. But it was like, I thought when you guys were there that it was a little bit more loose and it had been restricted, as time goes on. Obviously, it gets more and more restricted when incidents occur. I didn't realize it was like that when you were there as well.
Oh, no. It was, we all joked about it, talked about it, but it was tight. It was so tight. And that was kind of my senior guys, and I think that was different for them, is they were used to having that support, and we really didn't have it on this one. I remember, their ROEs were a lot looser in Garmser than they were in us, because we were really going into that whole hearts and minds, democracy in a box, and we were really pushing that, which was a great concept until you actually start getting in there and doing it. And really, being a part of that operation was obviously something phenomenal and a definite life experience, but the way that it was gone about being done was just, we didn't really clear the city. We just kind of pushed into the middle of it, got surrounded, and spent 7 months fighting our way from our own patrol bases and back. The whole hearts and minds thing really kind of screwed us over, just because we weren't able to actually clear it properly, and the ROEs were so tight in every aspect that we couldn't get approved for mortars. We couldn't get approved. I think I saw maybe one A10 gun run in our little AO be done. We had no RD. We had crazy. Probably several drone strikes on guys that were placing IEDs, but most of the guys that they saw placing IEDs, they would send us out after them. They didn't drop bombs. We would have to go get them because they didn't want to. Yeah. Oh yeah. We
That's crazy.
I can recall several patrols where we would get hey, they're putting them in now, go get them. And a couple of them were at night, a couple of them were during the day. So,
if you're like, if they're putting them in so close where you can quickly get out and get the guy, but normally they're in and out. Like, they're efficient. They're very efficient putting in those IEDs. So that's crazy, because we would use, we did HIMARS. We did HIMARS strikes on guys. We did air strikes on guys. If they were putting in an IED and we could tell that's what it was, that was it. That met the intent, the hostile intent
absolutely.
For the rules of engagement. Well, where we ran into issues for us in 2011 and really 2013 is if someone walked into a compound or to a tree line and you couldn't see them for a second, well, then you can no longer confirm that that's the person. You had to reconfirm that's the right person, or, hey, they're in a tree line. Well, there could be other people in the tree line, so we can't strike that tree line unless we know there's no one else in it. And it's like, I don't know, man.
Oh,
if I'm just a regular guy not doing anything wrong, I'm probably not hanging out in a tree line with guys shooting machine guns. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly. exactly. And no, and that was like really one of the bigger frustrations is we were just, there were so many times where our hands were tied behind our back. I remember before we even got in the city, we were on the outskirts. We were in that Fiddler's Green AO. And this was after we had lost Smith and Angus. I remember sitting up on post, and I mean, I saw this guy just walking by himself. Well, he started out with this other guy, like way off in the distance, and they kind of split. One guy started going off the one way, one guy started going the other way. He was the only guy in the desert, not doing anything, like, only guy for as far as the eyes could see. And he was just walking our direction, and there was no purpose behind it. He wasn't carrying anything. I was like, man, this is weird. And then he started walking like behind this building, and I could see the other guy had kind of looped up, and he was further up the road, kind of like by this stone wall. I remember radioing in. I'm like, hey, we got some action here. I'm not sure what's going on. I can't see this guy's hands. The entire time he's been walking, he's kind of had his hands like in a shirt type deal. His other buddy split up the road, and each time's continue to observe, report, continue to observe. I'm like, okay, but something just doesn't feel right. A patrol from another outpost a little bit further than us was coming up from behind them. So I radioed to them like, hey, just so you guys know, you got this dude that walked behind this building. I'm not sure what the deal was. I was just told to continue to observe. So they're coming up and they get to the building, and sure shit, they ended up finding an RPG sitting there up against the wall. The guy had scooted out when they saw that patrol coming. He scooted towards his buddy up the road, but it was like, it's just continue to observe, continue to observe. I'm not saying I wanted to smoke the dude right away, but at least can we send out a patrol to intercept? I mean,
like detain
the guy was lining up a
questions.
shot. Yeah, and he was nowhere where he should have been.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, in the city where our patrol base was, it was fairly populated. We had our farm fields all around us, so I understand the hesitation as far as just dropping bombs because it was a pretty dense little area. But they were tied. Our hands were tied.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when we're talking about doing strikes, we're not talking about dropping 2,000-pound bombs all over the place. Like, we have low collateral damage Hellfire missiles. You know what I'm saying? Like, stuff like that. You can't. You have to do the hearts and minds. Obviously, hey, we're here to make your life better. We're not trying to like. That was the whole thing when people compare the U.S. to like Russia or something like that, like invading Afghanistan. We weren't there to take Afghanistan. We didn't want Afghanistan. We want you to take it. We just don't want these terrorists to run it. Whereas like Russia is in Crimea or in Ukraine because they want to re-annex that country back into their own. They want to take it over. And so I think us being there and like, hey, we got to win the hearts and minds, like building wells, trying to build schools, trying to make a little bit of infrastructure improvements. When I was in Sangin, they were paving 611, to make it easier to travel, two, to try to lessen some of the IEDs that are on the road. But with that, you have to show the enemy that you're willing to stand up and fight or they're going to keep coming, and if you're unwilling to strike them, especially when they're out in the open or something like that, obviously you don't want to hit them when they're in a compound full of like people. It's just, I don't know, man. It's a tough nut to crack. That's war, right? You gotta get as close to the line of like really bad shit as you can without crossing it. You know what I'm saying? Like you want to take out those dudes, but you're not trying to like make the family that's just trying to farm. You're not trying to make their lives miserable. No,
and that was really one of the most I agree with the hearts and minds concept because in order to win the city, you got to win over the population. Just because that's a good thing to do as a human is just be good to other people. But it would have been nice if our hands were a little less tied as far as being war fighters and doing the war side of things. But overall, I mean, some of the most humbling and really most gratifying parts of all of my experiences in Afghanistan were just dealing with the culture and the locals, working with the kids, seeing them smile and run around for the first time and have a decent time and be laughing and joking and see the girls walking up and down the street and being able to just be kids. That's kind of driving where I'm at in life right now as far as I graduate here in December. But my time in Afghanistan working with the children there and just seeing the quality of life is still profound to the point where it's shifting my life daily.
Yeah. Yeah, it's again, they're just regular people, man. A lot of those people are just want to live their life and not be messed with. And the problem there is like look at them now. Now the Taliban has reinstituted this like harsh Sharia law, and It's unfortunate. I think some of them probably in some areas they probably wish we were still there to kind of help lessen the fucking intensity of their daily lives.
Oh,
I guess I don't
absolutely.
know, but
It
yeah, it's
was
just tough.
crazy. Just some of them thought we were still Russians, and that was kind of like a weird concept, like going there and being like, seeing a local villager be like, well, why are you here? Well, 9/11, if we're going way back, but we're here to defend and stop terrorism and all that. And they're like, oh, okay, like we thought you guys were the Russians. Like I've never heard of 9/11, and hearing
Oh
somebody
yeah.
say that, I was like, holy shit, we really are out there.
Oh yeah. You have
But
a different perspective than a lot of people, and it's something I appreciate as well. Like, you were in an area where they're literally like the Stone Age, but with occasional data plan on their cell phones.
without a doubt, people always ask me, like, what was it like over there? I'm like, well, it's a third world country. They live to farm, they farm to live, and that's really all they care about. They don't care if the Taliban's in charge. They don't care if the Americans are in charge. They really just want to they want to survive. They want to do the same thing they've been doing for thousands of years. They don't really know who we
Yeah,
are. They know that these guys really aren't that good, but they can still farm with these guys. They just don't want to be blown up by either side, really. That was what I gathered from it, is they
for
really just
sure.
hated both of us equally because we were destroying everything. So yeah, it was kind of, I always appreciated the culture and try to take it in. And you could probably see through the photography that I try to really absorb as much of that experience, and more so than just the gunfighting side.
Yeah, one of my more interesting memories from Afghanistan is flying in a 53 at
Yep.
night and looking out the back, and it's just pitch black with little cooking fires, little
Yep.
dots of cooking fires every once in a while, and you realize you're like, holy shit, dude, this place has
It
no
was
like real infrastructure.
zero. Yeah, zero. No, it's crazy. I mean, crazy seeing some of the setups and seeing the way that they would rig up, antennas for their phones. And
Yeah.
it was just so different coming from our way of life, and
Mm-hmm.
just seeing how simple life can be, and still seeing people be happy and smile at certain times. Obviously we're in a war zone, but like, shit, they seem pretty happy today, and it's like, well, they have zero of what we have and they still seem to be doing all right. So I definitely still live the American way, which some days I'm not proud of, but I definitely realize that someday it'd be nice to downsize and just be a little bit more simple like they were, because it just seemed like a lot easier lifestyle. um,
Sometimes, yeah.
So yeah, sometimes, again, minus the whole war and oppression and shitbags running your country, but
Yeah. I mean, we just take for granted technology, man. Like even turning lights
sure.
on and off, clean running
Yep.
water. I mean, I don't know how many times we had to medevac locals, mostly kids, for injuries from cooking fires, like their little propane stove blew up or whatever, because they're
Yep.
outside cooking people don't realize they're cooking on open fires. Where we were, there's obviously the city, Kabul, which is,
Yeah.
has more
Oh,
modern features and shit. But we were
sure.
like in the equivalent of like Iowa, like the
Yeah.
country. But this country is like way more country, like where they're literally, there's no bathrooms, you just
Nothing.
pee and shit wherever. You're
Yep.
bathing in canals. It's such a crazy place, and that's the kind of stuff I think about when I come back here and I hear people bitch about how bad they have it. I'm like, bro, you can
Sure.
order food on your phone and you don't even have to get up. And you can
Yeah.
have groceries delivered to your front door and you don't even have to move. You can just sit there and do nothing. These people are out there working, plowing fields by hand.
Oh
Like
yeah.
not a lot of them don't have tractors. Like what? Are you serious?
Nope.
A
And they're
tractor?
still using. I mean, a lot of them are using tree stumps to build their plows out of, and hooking them up to ox and stuff. I mean, they're still doing it the old school way. Just watching them build houses was always kind of a cool thing. Just watching them pack the bricks and make the bricks, and then
Mm-hmm.
just watching this mud hut go up over the course of 3 months, brick by brick, that they hand just stirred and
For
baked in the
sure.
sun for a week. And yeah, it was a really interesting cultural experience. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, hey, I want to get into your other deployments because you like went back. You went back to the States and then was back in Afghanistan pretty quickly after your first deployment. But I think we'll run out
Yeah.
of time because I want to also talk about your photography and
Sure.
the other stuff too. So let's just hold off on the other deployment talks and we'll bring those up on the next episode. For your
Sure.
photography stuff, when I originally saw your page, I thought you were a combat camera guy. because you have so much. You have so
Well, thank
much
you.
image and stuff. Well, I mean, it's all like B-roll of like just different things happening. Did you find it hard to like get? I mean, to make these recordings and also like be doing your job or whatever. You know, like.
No, so not really. Just I never had the camera out unless I felt fully comfortable to the point where I could take it out. The gun was always first and always looking around, but like I actually posted a video, I think it was yesterday or 2 days ago, of like one of those moments where I was able to pull out the camera and take some pictures. And you can see that it's a very relaxed. We were actually only a couple hundred yards from the patrol base, and we were coming back through this field, and you could tell just by the environment and the way that the people in front of me are walking that we were in a relatively safe area where we knew that things were that we were going to be good. I knew I had like probably 5, 6 guys behind me. I was up against cover on my left. I had a tree on my right. So you can see in that entire video kind of how my mind works. I'm not really looking at the camera too much. I kind of pull it up, take a shot. I'll make sure it took, and then I'll kind of look and I'll take another shot, and it goes right back in my pouch. I had it stored in my grenade pouch right on my chest. So it was just a click, take it out. Sometimes I wouldn't even be looking. I'd be over here kind of scoping out my area and just doing one of these, and then I put it back in. And I really wouldn't know what I had until I got back later from patrol. But then there are certain other like higher tense times, like where we're down in a ditch or something. A couple more rounds, you know, it was just feeling out the environment.
For
as
sure.
far as each shot was every picture I took in a serious environment was okay. They don't need me at this very second for bullets, so I'm going to take some shots with this. And as soon as that's off, I'm back in, and you know we're moving. But I was always very conscious of my surroundings, very in the moment of what needed to be done, not what I wanted to do with the camera. I made sure that the duty came first, and then I did the picture second. But
what kind of camera were you using? Was it just a point and shoot camera, or was it like a DSLR with lenses, or?
Nope, just a little Sony Cyber Shot.
That's what I was gonna say. I used to have one of those. Yeah.
I think actually.
That's funny.
It's right here.
That's awesome, dude.
It's one of these. I went through 2 of them. I liked it so much on the first one that I bought a new one for my second deployment. So it was this little guy. Just a little Sony Cyber Shot. It fit great. I mean, it fit perfectly in the grenade pouch. Didn't take up a lot of space. It was super durable. I mean, with the amount of pictures I was taking, sliding that front thing up and down, the dust never seemed to bother. The lens always stayed clean enough. Yeah, I could quickly see the pictures on the back of the screen there. So it was a great little camera for it. And to be honest, I mean, it took some of my most favorite pictures that I've ever taken, and some that have got me pretty far in photography. So that little guy was a workhorse, and I appreciate every picture it put out for me.
Did you ever consider getting like a GoPro or something like that? You just strapped on and let run?
So by the time I was on my first deployment, GoPro was still kind of not new and up and coming, but it was still, I think, more expensive, and it hadn't really caught on. The whole helmet cam deployment thing, as far as I knew, because I'm one of those guys that, like, if it's a cool tech thing, I'll probably buy it because I like that shit.
Yeah.
So, but I didn't feel the need to, or I don't think it was that hot of a topic yet to have a GoPro on your helmet and at that deployment. And obviously I'd seen some guys that had brought them, and a lot of guys did have them, but I just wasn't on that wave yet, I guess. By my third one, which is the videos that I've been posting lately, that one I had a Contour HD helmet cam for. So I got some footage from the third one on a helmet cam, but I really wish I would have. I kick myself in the ass every day for not having a helmet cam on my first deployment, because that would have been some badass footage.
Yeah, my old corpsman, when I was on my advisor team in Sangin in 2013, he brought a GoPro, and then they made mounts for the helmet, like the mount, a GoPro mount that fits right into the NVG slot, the night vision goggles slot on your helmet. I was like, that's pretty wicked, man. But he rarely ever even took it out. I think he may have taken it out like 3 times. I was like, man, you missed. There's a lot of stuff. Yeah, you missed out on a lot of stuff. We got some cool photos and stuff, but it wasn't necessarily. Sure. I worked with a on that deployment, because it was at my JTAC deployment. I had a Samsung tablet that had all my maps and stuff on it.
Oh, okay.
So occasionally I'd bust that out and take photos with it because it was just a regular tablet and everything. So I got some cool pictures that way. But no, I think it's great, man. I think it's awesome. I think sometimes people in the moment either don't want to do it, don't care about it. There's obviously other important things going on in life about documenting, a deployment and stuff like that. But I think everyone in hindsight appreciates when somebody else like documented, they're like, oh man, I'm really glad these photos are out there, or this video or whatever. We had on my deployment, John Isley, who was there as a logistics officer on my advisor deployment, but he's also a photographer, and he brought his full camera setup and everything like that. So, our team was lucky. Sometimes I think one of our machine gunners got mad at him because he's like, hey, pay attention. Like, you're not here to take photos. You're here to shoot the machine gun if necessary. I think that was like one time, but I think we all appreciate the photos that we have now, these high quality, really good photos of our deployment and stuff like that we can look back on and like, oh yeah, playing volleyball with the Afghans. That was a good time.
And I have to agree, it's been, and it's why I started doing this. I mean, if you look back in the early pictures of the whole Granite Roots photography thing, I started doing photography. I'm still an amateur by all means, but I started back in high school. I took a photography class, fell in love with it. And I just love the way the world looked through the lens and just the different ways of looking at the world in that aspect. And I kind of kept up with it over the years, but I really saw the deployment as a way to, when I was taking the pictures, it wasn't so much of I'm doing this to remember it later, but it was more so of I'm doing it because I want to capture this very specific moment because it just speaks, or just the way it looks, it resonates somehow. And it's pretty cool with this whole venture, I guess. Me and my entire very thankful for 540 followers, I think. It's been cool watching that number grow as I put up the Afghan stuff, and more so just seeing the feedback and like, hey, love the picture, brings me back. Hey, did you know so-and-so? And it's just, I've been getting a lot of messages from people I served with and people I didn't, just saying like, hey man, that really brings me back. Hey man, can I get those pictures? Like I remember that day. And it's cool to be able to provide that because like I said, a lot of guys have reached out and be like, hey man, can I get some of those pictures? And I'm doing my best to send them all out. So I know there's some guys waiting right now. I'll get them out. But I tell them all the time, like, these aren't just my picture. I took them, but they're not mine. They're ours because we were all there when these were taken. This is your deployment too. It wasn't just mine. I mean, you were right outside the frame of the lens here. So if you want the picture, just ask me. I'll give it to you. It might take me a minute, but I'll give it to you.
You ought to just put them all in a Google Drive folder and then send out the link.
Yeah.
That way everybody can just pull whatever they want out of it. But yeah, no, man, I think you're 100% right. You know what I'm saying? I think that's people appreciate that kind of thing. I've gotten this similar kind of feedback here where people are like, man, I hadn't thought about that in a while. Or, oh, you guys brought it, because having a conversation like this, especially with someone like you who's like a junior enlisted, you did your first deployment as a junior guy and kind of worked your way up and stuff. There's realities of the military that other people aren't going to know about. Or there's things that happen in Afghanistan that are not like crazy or anything, just like little quirks about stuff that you will connect with because you were there. Like, I was thinking about this morning posting a picture of pine cigarettes.
Shit, yeah.
And
charcoal for days, man.
And put it up and be like, because in my stories on Instagram, I always do polls, and putting it up, be like, does this bring back memories, or I don't know what this is? And 100%, anybody that did like deployments to Iraq, people went to Afghanistan, a lot of the dudes that smoke know pine cigarettes because that's all they could smoke.
Oh my god!
Or that was like shitty option.
Yeah, man. Those are mild 88s, dude. Korea, the Korean mild 88s.
But it's shit like that, that guys don't think about. Like, when's the last time you thought about a pine cigarette? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I couldn't even tell you.
Yeah, so it's awesome. I think I think the people that are out there that either, see your content, watch your videos, watch your pictures, or people that listen to this podcast, they have that same kind of reaction to some of these things. It's like, oh yeah, pine cigarettes, god damn it. We're talking about transiting through Kyrgyzstan and Leatherneck and Dwyer and the process. That's everyone knows that's the worst part about the deployment is getting there and leaving. It's just a process of dragging your bags everywhere. But no, man, I think it's great documenting and photography is one of those things where I'm also a photographer. I like to get out and shoot photos. I've sold some of my
Awesome.
work and stuff like that, which has been pretty awesome. I haven't picked up the camera it's been a couple months because I've been so busy, but I'm planning on getting back into it and start posting more on my photography page at J Kramer Media. People check that out. And it's just, for me, it's one, there's a couple of things I like about photography. Is one, you get out and just experience new things. You know, you're like, hey, this thing looks really cool. I want to go shoot a photo of it. So it drives you to go see stuff that you may not normally have wanted or had a reason to go look at or what. You know, I go out to the desert and go take pictures out there sometimes because there's some weird stuff out there. There's no other reason for me to be out in the desert. Like, I'm not going to go out there just to go out there. So it gives me a good reason to go out and experience this new. So it's opened my eyes to different things like that, you know, being able to experience new things. But like you kind of alluded to there, it also gives you a different perspective on stuff. Like when you start shooting photos a lot, when you're walking around, you're like looking at stuff like, oh, that would have been a cool photo. Oh, this would have been framed perfectly. This angle, if I had
Ain't
my
that the
you
truth?
know, it's just, that's just how it is.
There's,
you look at everything.
Working downtown in Detroit, I mean, I have this one shot that I've probably been waiting for I don't know, probably 3 months now. I'm just waiting for it. And if you're a photographer, I think you know what that means. Like, you're just, I know the angle I want to take it from. I know what I want to take it with, but it's just waiting for that right moment. Like, there's a picture that I put up probably a few months ago. It's of a light. It's of a light with a building in the back. It's downtown. It's of a light post, and I probably stared at that light post for a solid 5.5, 6 months, trying to figure out how I wanted to compose and frame that shot. And when I finally ended up working that series, it was really cool when it all came together, because I hadn't even realized it. But when I started looking at the pictures a little bit more, you can see through the fog, the sun is sitting directly above. And it was just like one of those things, like, I'm glad that I waited 5.5 months to take this picture, because it was right. And it was that it does provide a whole new view. Now, every time I walk past this light post, I see the world this way, instead of just whatever shitty cloudy day it is downtown.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I know exactly. I know exactly what you're talking about. You're like, you want to be in the moment where the sun is in the right spot, the shadows are in the right spot, everything's lining up, and you're there to get that awesome image. You know, and it is cool when you go back and look at old photos, one, to see the growth. Because anybody that's a photographer can look back at their images from 2 years ago, especially shit they posted, and be like, why did I ever release that? Like, oh my God, that looks horrible. But it's just you growing, you realizing that you've become better, your editing has become better, your framing is better and stuff like that. But yeah, it's just a great thing for sure. And I know exactly what you're talking about when you're talking about waiting for a shot. I've definitely done that. I've definitely taken a bunch of photos of something and then being like, none of these are good. You know, this is not going to work. I'll just come back. Yeah. I mean, I've got thousands of photos that are just never released. And you know, the problem, like you said, you went back and you looked and you saw the sun was lined up and it all looked really cool and you hadn't noticed. That's happened to me before too, where I've looked through old photos from like a year ago or something like that. And I'm just kind of flipping through and I'm like, oh shit, that's a badass photo. And I didn't even know it. You know, I remember.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
I was in Indiana doing some photos of some guys at a motocross race. And I was shooting guys. I was stood on a corner, and as they were coming around the corner, you know, kind of leaned over and dirt kicking everywhere. I was shooting the photos as they were coming around the corner. And I was trying to get it as I was tracking with them so that the background would be blurry, you know, they'd be in focus or whatever. And I remember a lot of them, I was just like, that's blurry, that's blurry. But then when I went back and looked at them, one of them had like a really cool framing. And it was just like perfect. And I was like, I can't believe this is like probably one of my favorite photos I've ever taken. And I almost just threw it in the trash pile, you know, had I not gone back and looked. So yeah, man,
I'm finding a lot of that. Going through these old folders from deployment and stuff. I'm finding a lot of that where it's like, cause I've, you know, all the stuff that I've posted on my page, unless specifically mentioned, has been my own. It's all stuff that I've taken, so that there is a finite amount of stuff that I'm going to have. So eventually, like, I know 95% of my followers are all, you know, awesome war dogs and like seeing the stuff like that. But here soon, eventually, I'm going to run out of the military content and going to be transitioning back into my more non-military type photography. So yeah, there is a finite thing, but I am getting pretty excited to get back into that aspect once I'm done dumping all these the military ones.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things, man. You know, you just got to keep building that content, and then you'll find what you'll probably run into also is later on is you'll repurpose that content, some of that military content. You know, like I've released this photo, people have seen it, but now I'm going to add it to this reel with like 10 other photos. You know, so now that I'm reusing it, you know, stuff like that. That kind of stuff works and everything, but hey, that is what it is, man. Life moves on. You have to, you have to as well, right?
Oh, absolutely. I'm not. Yeah, I'm not even sweating it. I'm just happy to get the images out there, the deployment ones, because like we were talking about, it does resonate with a lot of guys. So I'm excited to get that stuff out there. I'll definitely repurpose it. But yeah.
Do you think you would have joined to be combat camera? Do you think that would have been a enjoyable job for you?
I think man, that's tough. I mean, in the very beginning here, I had mentioned, you know, I did want to go to Montana State and do the photography gig. So like photography was on my mind when I was joining. And it's nothing against combat camera, but I wouldn't change a single thing that I did in the military. I mean, being an infantry guy was incredible just because you got to do so much. I mean, I kind of got to be combat camera. I got to be all the other jobs. I got to drive the trucks. You know, I got a little bit of all the MOSs. So I was able to experience in that, and I just maybe combat camera would have limited me a little bit more, or been to the point where being combat camera, that would have been more my focus instead of the gun side, which I really appreciated, being more focused on the gun side and taking pictures when I could. It was kind of this mix. So I guess the short answer is no, I probably wouldn't have gone combat camera or go back and do it, but I probably would have found joy in it. Some of the, you know, just like anything, some assignments probably would have been more boring than others, and I probably would have been wanting to be a gunfighter those days. But
yeah, for sure. I imagine being like a division combat camera guy opens up some opportunities to go out with battalions that are training and doing different things, shooting mortars, you know, doing close air support.
Oh yeah. But I do combat camera guys, and they're awesome. They put out some great work. I love them. I mean, great crews. I've worked with a few combat camera guys and awesome guys all around.
The bummer would be when you're like assigned like every Friday to go record or do whatever for some retirement ceremony or some whatever.
Exactly.
I don't want to listen to this again. Nobody cares.
Yep. I'm all set with this retirement party. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, man, this has been a great interview. I really appreciate it. If you'd like to give a shout out to any kind of companies or your own social media and stuff like that, feel free to do so.
Okay. Yeah, no, I appreciate it. See if I can remember everybody. It's problem. Some of them being just old friends, some of them being organizations that I think are making a big difference right now. Hunter 7 being one of them. They're doing a lot of work in the community, especially looking into the cancers and stuff associated with their time in service. So I always like giving them a shout out whenever I can, you know, just daily conversations. Hunter 7 seems to be doing a lot of real good work, and they were fundamental in that whole I think the pact passing through Congress and Senate there. So that was really cool to see. PB Abate, I've been seeing them putting out stuff. I'm not even overly familiar with them, but what they're doing seems to be phenomenal. So, you know, push as much love to them as possible. Goons Up, I've been talking with the Goons Up crew quite a bit over the last year and change. They were pretty fundamental and even getting me pretty much most of my followers, I would say, on Instagram here. The guys over there at Goons Up really kind of shared my stuff, posted a lot of it, and I know a lot of my traffic came from them, so I'm really appreciative of their support. I got Pine Grove Training, which is my own personal company with my buddy Tyler, who is actually a Navy guy. He was a Navy small arms instructor. We met after I got out, but we now run a training company, Pine Grove Training. You can find them at pinegrovetraining.com, but that's kind of more of a early startup thing. We're not necessarily that busy yet. We're building up the block, so stand by on that, but that'll be a good thing to come. And then finally, I want to give a shout out to my buddy Ambrose Bandy at Ambrose Bandy, AMBROSEBANDY on Instagram. He's a hard charger, just like the rest of us. He was in the Marine Corps, saw all the shit that we saw. I met him at Quantico, hell of an instructor, and what he's doing right now on the motivation scale is he's putting in work. He is motivating people left and right to get out there and do some good stuff, not only personally but physically, and just he's a motivator. He's just a natural born motivator. So I highly recommend checking him out if you're feeling lazy any day. So
if you need that motivation.
Oh my goodness, he has been putting in work on this hill for months now. I mean, he's out there getting it every day, and I feel like a sack of shit every time I look at Instagram. I'm like, hey, thanks, dude, you're making me look bad.
That's how all those guys make you feel, right? Like, damn it.
Oh my goodness, these guys are out there putting in work. But yeah, all those guys, I highly recommend all of them. And yeah, I think that's really about it. I'm sure I'll think of more, more to come. As soon as we hang up, I'll be like, oh shit.
Yeah, it happens,
1-6
man.
in general, 1-6 the main page there. They're doing awesome. Just all these, I think every page, all these pages that are coming together and just really focusing on the brotherhood aspects, bringing the community together, pushing out information, doing buddy checks. Just hey, how's it going? Everybody, hit me up. How's it going? Yeah, I think that's really fundamental and key right now. So, I mean, really shout out to anybody who's reaching out to anybody just to make sure that everybody's doing all right. I think it's a really weird time right now for a lot of people, especially this week in general. So I think it's really important that everybody reaches out,
Yeah, I think, the veteran community has matured some to the point where it's like, dude, this whole 22 push-ups a day bullshit is stupid. Like, we need something of substance to occur. And organizations like PB Abate and stuff like that, what they're doing, is obviously awesome. Goons Up, their page is, I mean, he's got a cult following basically within the infantry ranks of the Marine Corps. He may be the unofficial commanding general.
I would say just watching him get big was such a cool experience. Watching just how fast he took off and that group took off and everything. It's so odd. I talk to him and wish him the best every time. I'm like, damn, dude, you're crushing it, man. Fuck
for
yeah.
Sure. Yeah, he is for sure. I had the opportunity. He came on the podcast and talked. He's super humble. I don't remember the episode number, but he's super humble guy.
I'll look it up.
Yeah, and he good people. He again, like I said, he's basically the unofficial commanding general of the Infantryman of the Marine Corps because they all love him and stuff like that. David Armstrong was talking about he was just out in 29 Palms for EMV, and the Goons Up guys were out there. And they went to go take a group photo with all the Marines that were like shooting machine guns and stuff. And the Marines didn't know that he was there. They just knew that this was just some random civilian guy. And one of them pulled a Goons Up flag out of his pocket to hold up in front of the photo. And I was like, dude, that's when you know you're legit. When you don't even, wasn't even a planned moment. This dude pulled out one of your products and just hung it up. Like, I was like, that's fucking cool, man. Yeah,
I love
for sure.
Anybody get it. I mean, any of the service members on any branch of anywhere, veteran-owned businesses, if they're getting it, man, what a good day.
Yeah, and all these people are all pushing the same deal. Like I was saying, like the 22 push-ups stuff is dumb. Reach out and just, hey, say what's up. What's up with your buddy that you used to work with, or so. Everybody leaves the military and then they go off into their own abyss of like what. It's just a completely different lifestyle. Overnight, you go from this small, tight-knit group of friends that you're all doing stuff, and it's all like everything's cool, like you're doing these crazy things, to back to the real world where it's kind of boring and lame.
Yeah.
And you don't have anyone to talk to and talk shit to, and stuff like that. So, it's like now with the technology we have, reach out, man. Just reach out and tell someone, hey, man, it's been a while. I hope you're doing well. Maybe they won't reach back, but maybe they will. And you'll get to rekindle an old friendship or something like that. So really appreciate you throwing those names out there. I think all those channels are doing great stuff, the ones that I'm aware of. I'll have to check out Hunter 7. I feel like I've heard of that, but I haven't. I'll have to look into it.
Yeah, there are probably some people you could probably try to get on. I mean, what a great organization. They're really making the difference out there on the front line of like just treatment for veterans, specifically in the cancer world. But they're literally having meetings over in DC daily and stuff, really making stuff happen. So I definitely recommend looking into them.
That's good to hear, man. All right, and everybody can check out my stuff at Former Action Guys on Instagram, at Former Action News as well. My website is jkramergraphics.com. I do have the new Patreon. All the audio episodes are now going ad-free, so support the show on Patreon, Former Action Guys on there. And that's it. Thanks again, man. I really appreciate you coming on.
Hey, absolutely, Justin. I appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
Yeah, man.